Hello and welcome to the Intentional Clinician podcast. I'm your host, Paul Krauss, licensed professional counselor. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Andrew Henry about his new book, Hypnosis with a Soul. Andrew Henry was on the podcast before talking about his last book, The Gift, An Unconscious Intuitive Mind. Both books are available right now on Apple Books on the online platform. Andrew Henry is a licensed professional counselor in private practice in Mesa, Arizona. Andrew is an EMDR certified clinician and has 16 years of experience in the field of counseling. In addition to being an author, Andrew taught master's level counseling as an adjunct professor at Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona. He continues to work in private practice utilizing Jungian methods, hypnosis, EMDR, elements of dialectical behavioral therapy, energy psychology, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral therapy. Andrew has been doing some lecturing online to campuses and other interested groups about hypnosis and Jungian methods via video conferencing. Andrew has his master's in clinical psychology and counseling from Ottawa University in Phoenix, Arizona, and an undergraduate degree from Arizona State in sociology. You can find out more about Andrew by going to his website, counselingbyandrew.com. If you're a longtime listener or this is your first time, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to the Intentional Clinician podcast. If this show is useful to you, please share it with people you know. All right, now for the interview. Okay, Andrew Henry, welcome back to the Intentional Clinician podcast. So glad to have you on once again.
Great to be here, Paul, and appreciate you making the space, and so we can talk about, things, hypnosis, and all these things. And honored to be here.
Wonderful, and I'm excited to report to our listeners who have been really downloading that first episode that you have another book out. This time called Hypnosis with a Soul. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, yeah. Thank you again for asking. So Hypnosis with the Soul all began for me when I took an advanced class, an intensive advanced class at the Erickson Institute in Phoenix, Arizona. And there I was tasked with creating a custom trance induction. And I remember going home that evening thinking, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to create this? And I started reflecting on my experience doing meditation, Zen Buddhist meditation. And there, years back, I discovered a way to go deep within myself, just following my breath. And I felt like I connected to the depths of my being, where there were keys and answers to things. And I thought, well, what if I could do that with hypnosis? What if I could actually bring a person in a trance induction to the depths of their being, and they wouldn't have to spend days and days and days of following their breath like I did with the Buddhist meditation, but do it within a trance, within a session. And lo and behold, it actually worked, and I was grateful for that. The first case was there was a gal, and I'm going to call her Sally, as I called her in the book to protect the innocent, so to speak. And she said she had an issue with a person who she was practicing yoga with. And this individual literally would do they would have their leg up in the air while doing downward dog. And it annoyed the heck out of her. It really got under her skin. And so the instructor said, okay, pick something that's mildly troubling to work with your partners and break down into cell groups. And when she said this to me, I said, now, are you sure this is a mild disturbance? And she said, yeah, it's a mild disturbance. And I said, this is a trance induction that I created last night as we were tasked to do. Are you okay with me using this induction? And I told her a little bit about it, and she said, sure. So I brought her into the trance, and she slowly went into the trance. And when I brought her into the depths of her being, she reported actually seeing the issue with this other individual in the yoga class. And when she sat there and acknowledged his presence, and sat with that for a bit, she began to cry. She began to weep. And I asked her, I said, well, I just paid attention to what was happening and I didn't want to interrupt her, but I was curious as to how she was doing. When her tears were dried up, I brought her out of the trance. And that's when I asked her, what was that like for you? And I'll never forget her words. She said, he was me, or he is me. Actually, the words he is me. And I asked her, well, what do you mean by that? And she said, he does things that I have let go of within my life. He's carefree. He does his own thing. He goes to the beat of his own drum. And I was holding him accountable for the things that I had given up. So I was able to forgive him and reclaim them for myself. I said, fantastic. That's great. And so that was the first trance induction with soul level hypnosis that I've done.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what trance is for people that maybe don't know much about hypnosis?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So trance is a common word within hypnosis, and it means into a very, very relaxed state where the person's unconscious mind begins to open up and they begin to explore parts of them that are usually either not acknowledged or called upon or relied upon unless a person has experienced that a few times themselves.
Okay, so that's part of the hypnosis process.
Yes.
And so I know you've got a great deal of experience with mindfulness, with Jungian methods, and regular talk therapy. So how long have you been doing hypnosis?
Well, hypnosis for me goes way back to 2006 when I took a beginner's class of Ericksonian hypnosis given by the state of Arizona. And right then I began to understand that trance was, for me at that time, kind of difficult to achieve because I was told to stare at a penny and just stare at that penny. And then if I felt something, well, then maybe that would bring about a different feeling state. And I kind of felt a little bit different by staring at the penny, but I really didn't quite get that same feeling of peace and calm that I was expecting. So I began to study. So I picked up some books, one by Michael Yapko called Trance Induction. And I'm sorry, Trance Work, not Trance Induction, but Trance Work. And Yapko is a phenomenal hypnotherapist, and he works with the Erickson Institute and does a whole lot of groundbreaking and foundational work, directly some of it from Milton Erickson himself, and he's added his own concepts to it. And then from there, that encouraged me to then take the advanced classes, and that kind of circles right back to where I was talking about within the book of creating the trance induction for soul level hypnosis. So
I like it a lot. So, I mean, these are tried and true techniques. And I know that hypnosis has been studied a lot over the years and been proven to be effective. But I think because of stage shows and pop interpretations, people have basically kind of made fun of hypnosis and sort of thought that it was weird or scary or dangerous. And I have, I actually went to a Michael Yapko training, a brief one. Actually, it wasn't the full one, just for fun. And it was fantastic how well it worked when you use the techniques that are just right there. I'm wondering how we can speak to the consumers that may be a little bit worried about trying out hypnosis in the clinical setting.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, Paul. The stage hypnosis and the different ways, it's shown on TV occasionally. And without fail, usually if I approach someone about hypnosis in my practice, about 30% of the time or so, people will say, will I be barking like a dog or scratching like a chicken? And depending on the person and depending, on the situation, I might say, well, you never know. No, or I joke around with them a little bit, but usually I keep it very clinical. And I say, no, this isn't stage hypnosis. This isn't. Although those are forms of hypnosis. There's no question about it. They are able to achieve levels of trance on stage, and they're able to do things, but they're doing it for comedic, levels of, connection with the individual. Now, I'm familiar with an individual though who does hypnosis. What he calls street hypnosis, where he'll just walk up to people on the street and say, "Are you interested in changing anything?" And he does this at the beach in California, and they'll say, "Well, I don't know. What do you mean?" And he does it for therapeutic reasons, but he does it out on the beach and just out in person. So there are ways to actually bring about trance induction in areas where people might think that it might not be achievable. And
Yes, that is really quite interesting because I am not too well versed in all the research about hypnosis, but from what I'm understanding, a lot of the clinical hypnosis guides your mind into a state, a deep, relaxing state, which allows you to get past a lot of the surface anxiety and ruminations, repetitive thought cycles, identity, narrative problems, and then guides you once you're in that deep state to address something that you might find scary or difficult or something like that. And other times it just actually helps you be more at peace. I mean, it can be whatever you want, I suppose, but when you're addressing something you want to change, it can actually bring you through like a visualization of changing it. And that is so powerful to the brain because a lot of times our thinking patterns and the way we actually imagine things is almost just as powerful as the actual action, according to certain research that I've been reading on brain science. So is that sound like an elementary definition of what some hypnosis sessions can do?
yeah, that actually sounds foundational. It sounds not only elementary, but very, very germane. It's very important to for people to understand that our rational mind, we have two parts to our mind. We have a rational mind and an unconscious mind or intuitive mind. And that rational mind will want to think about things in concrete ways, such as, this table, this computer, all these things that are in this world. The unconscious mind, though, deals in symbolism and it deals in metaphors. So when a person is in a trance, they're able to deal with things that they possibly fear within their rational life, but they can deal with it sometimes in symbolic ways and in ways that allow them to process it differently than they would if they're just literally taking it from, say, like reading something off of a page.
Well, yes, and that does make sense because most people, if they feel stuck or they want to change something, have already tried literally doing it, and it hasn't really worked, and they've tried different methods on their own, or maybe just talk therapy or something like that. So I see that as value. Now, a big question I think our listeners are having, which would be, what is this soul level hypnosis? And can you, I know without giving the whole book away, can you explain a little bit about what that means?
Sure, sure. Well, from my perspective as a counselor who's worked with people for over 15 years, something that I've believed in for quite some time is that people have the answers that they're looking for when they arrive for the therapy session. They're aware of certain things, and some of that is in their unconscious mind. Some of that is not at the surface level, but there are these keys that they have that if they're just patiently brought to, they're able to bring them forward. So the soul level, the soul part in the soul hypnosis is that quiet, still place that's deep within a person. And I believe it's mostly housed within their unconscious mind, but I'm not really sure exactly where it is. Maybe somewhere between their heart and their brain or something. But it's really a very calm and quiet part of them. And when they get there, they know it. They are very relaxed. They feel supported. They feel unconditional love. Now, occasionally, when I bring a person to their soul level, they're very fearful. They feel like they can't trust the experience. That's about 1 in about every 10 people that happens to, and so about 10%. And when that happens, I'm now aware that a person has begun to identify, or those people have begun to identify, some traumatic event or something that was told to them very early in life as to being who they are and what they're about. So I'll ask them to float further back in time, possibly in a very deep trance into in utero, or possibly even before they were born, to see and to witness some kind of light or some kind of symbol from that calm place. And then I ask them to look through the lens of that calm space, that calm light, and look at their current issue that's at hand in their life. And literally, things begin to transform in that session. They begin to see and understand things about what they were faced with by being in that calm, deep place within themselves that's beneath that previously thought of space of who they were.
So it sounds like you're trying to get them out of the everyday thinking into something deep. And now, I guess what I would wonder about soul level is, do you find that people have to be spiritual or religious to do this? Or do you feel like that anybody could do this without having, maybe they have different belief systems on what a soul is, or what does
Great
that mean?
question.
You know, how do you help those people that may be a little doubtful about even having, what is a soul? Do I have a soul? You know, that sort of thing.
Great question. Yeah, generally speaking, people believe that they have a soul. Probably about 80% of the people that I've talked to believe that they have a soul. They have some kind of deep place within them. Those who don't, I ask them, well, how do they conceive? Is there? I talked with them a little bit about energy, and I talked with them about molecular science, and that in the 1950s, scientists would look at the cell, and they were confounded. They examined what they thought was empty space within the cell and within the nucleus, and it wasn't until really powerful electron microscopes were brought in where they actually saw, wait a minute, that's not empty space. We're not empty at our core. That's energy in there. They can actually see energy. So at our core, at our deepest core, there is energy. And so when I talk to them about science, those who don't believe that there's a soul oftentimes will believe in science. And I'll say, that's the space that we're trying to reach. That's the deep, calm place deep within.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so interesting. Yeah, because was it the particle machine? I'm going to totally butcher the name. The Higgs boson particle. Is that what we're talking about?
I think that's close. I think that's either it or very close to it. I've heard it before. But
yes, the Higgs boson particle. Yeah. So they're trying to find smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller particles, like subatoms and subatoms, and then they found quarks, which are basically appearing on our instruments as basically appearing in two places almost simultaneously, or moving and not being seen between. So,
well, now you're getting into quantum physics and quantum science and quantum computing and quantum mechanics. I love that stuff. I love physics. I love, quantum. Yeah. I mean, there you wonder, well, does a person's soul energy exist possibly in another, strata or part of a universe or something? That's fascinating. I haven't studied that to that extent.
There's actually some fascinating interviews with scientists on this very subject who are remaining objective, I think, because they're trying to just present the evidence about what all this means. And it's really hard to even understand what all this means, because if you've studied the size of the universe, you know that we're basically smaller than ants. So,
Right.
which is a little scary for most people. That's why we just prefer to be on the Earth, right? We don't want to really go off into space.
Right.
But there was some scientists that were talking all about string theory and all these things. So for the materialists, the existential materialists who believe everything's just sort of here it is, I don't know what it is, no spirituality, soul, it still works because we're talking about a deep energetic connection within you. And if you think about, and I'm not really sure if this is true, but your anxiety or depression as a pattern molecularly on a very a small level in your neurons, below the neuron connection level is the molecular level. And if your depression is circling and your anxiety is sparkling, if you can get down to a more still level, then you can access this. I mean, it might be a stretch, but I think we can say, without being scientists, that's a way to interpret what the scientists are saying. There was this lady who writes all these books about quantum physics and spirituality, and they're not religious, but they're just interested in the topic. And her name is Nancy Ellen Abrams. And I'm not really sure what I even think of it, but it does go into a lot of, her and her husband are PhD quantum physicists, scientists in some university in California. And I find their stuff quite intriguing. So that being said, it sounds like you have the ability to help people get to what we can call a soul level or a deep hypnosis, whether or not they are agnostic or spiritual or materialist. So it sounds like this could be for anybody. And I guess I'd like to know, what are some examples of people coming to you that maybe have tried other therapies or other things where they find that they really want to try hypnosis as a new approach, and why would they do that?
Yeah, fascinating. So people who have tried other approaches, generally speaking, have either been too brought into the experience of what was happening to them. And one of the things that I explained to them, especially using not only the soul level hypnosis, but just Ericksonian hypnosis in general, is that it's dealing pretty much with what's called metaphors and just symbolism. So instead of, by way of example, if someone's going to want to stop a behavior, a session of Ericksonian hypnosis is not going to say, well, in a calm state, stop that behavior, quit doing that, you're doing something wrong. It's not going to do that at all. It's going to actually talk about a story that's custom tailored to that person dealing with either struggle or overcoming something, and it could have something to do with nature, or it could have something to do with some kind of work scenario, or it could have something, but it's metaphoric in nature. It's not direct hypnosis, it's indirect hypnosis.
And so that level, I think that would help people understand that this is customized to them. It's
Yes.
not necessarily, some sort of one size fits all approach where you take them through some protocol. Now, I know that the induction or trance techniques may be similar, but then you're customizing it to their situation and trying to pay attention to what is important to them, which then in turn can help their mind or their brain or their soul adjust accordingly. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Our unconscious mind and our conscious mind have these safeguards. So if we're directly telling a person, that this is what's occurring, or this is what we need to stop, we're not fools. We're gonna try and thwart that or work around it. But if it's indirectly spoken to in a trance, that engages the unconscious mind into working with it to achieve some type of calm or some type of peace within what was happening.
I think that's a great definition of hypnosis. How do people know that they're coming to a hypnotherapist that is not some sort of person claiming to be a hypnotherapist, like the average consumer? Because I know in therapy world, we have licenses through the state, and people can be sure they can look us up on the state website. They can look up our credentials, what people say about us, and all of this. So hypnotherapy has its own certificates of training. I know that. But how do people know they're going to somebody who might have their best interest at heart here?
Right. Well, they do have to call and be selective. They have to possibly ask, where has that person been trained? Where did they get their experience? What's their level of expertise? Possibly some examples of what they've done, and situations, maybe a case study or a case example of what they've worked with. Some people specialize in specific things, and I'm kind of a generalist when it comes to hypnosis. I just really want to work with the individual and whatever they present. But to answer your question directly, on my website, I have examples of hypnosis and where I've studied hypnosis, and a short video about hypnosis. The board here in Arizona does not oversee hypnosis. They don't consider it a type of therapeutic intervention, such as other interventions like CBT, EMDR, DBT, and so on. MI, motivational interviewing. So their hands are off of it. They don't want to oversee it, and they don't call people onto it. So a person can actually practice hypnosis, say with a master's degree, and not be licensed with the state of Arizona and still see people. Now I'm licensed with the state, and I treat those people like I do my regular clients, and write notes and submit to insurance and things such as that.
Oh, that's good. So, I mean, you can use hypnosis as an intervention if you're a therapist, but if you're not a therapist, you could use hypnosis, but you probably need a long disclaimer. And so people going to somebody who's not licensed, maybe they need to make sure they trust the person and all of that, because there's plenty of people that are wonderful healers that don't have a license. I think that's where the word of mouth and the free market come into play. So a little bit, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you're right on that word of mouth part for sure, because half of the people that I work with hypnosis have been referred by people who have either had hypnosis and they're sent to me, or they've heard something I've done in hypnosis, and then they want to schedule an appointment. I do have another case example, though, to mention if you want to.
Yes,
hear
absolutely.
it. There was a gal, it's very fascinating. There was a gal who I was using EMDR with for about a month and a half. And the only thing that would not relieve itself of was this nagging feeling in her neck. And she had this neck pain. Yeah. And whatever I used, and she was a 0 in disturbance, on the SUD scale for EMDR. That's the subjective unit of distress, for those of you who are not knowledgeable about the EMDR. So she was down to a 0 on everything except for this pain in her neck. And I tried bilateral movements, tapping, all these different things. And so on a whim, I said, well, why don't we try some hypnosis? Well, we did some hypnosis. She went back to a past life where, and this person had a traumatic death. And then when she connected to her higher power, which she had a belief in, I didn't suggest that to her, and this higher power healed her throat. She came out of the session, and her throat pain was gone, and it's been gone now for over a year.
Yes, so that is really interesting. I want to definitely, in case somebody just hit the stop button when they heard past life, kind of talk about that. So whether or not you believe in past lives or whatever, it doesn't matter, because let's just say we're agnostic to that as the practitioner. Certain people believe in that, certain people don't. Doesn't matter, because let's just say it doesn't exist, because we're not taking a stance on that. Let's just say it doesn't. It's a metaphorical, it's a metaphor in her mind of what happened. Somebody or some part of her, or a memory or a historical something that she's feeling died, and then she asked a higher power for healing. Somatically, she felt better. We don't know what's happening there. We can know through brain science that placebo works mostly way better than drugs. We know this.
That's right.
And most of the FDA, to pass a drug onto the market, you can do almost as many tests as you want through as many labs as you want and as many studying participants as you want, but you only have to get 2 of them to beat placebo. Not very many.
Wow.
Prozac, 25 tests to beat placebo. So if that tells you something, therapy works better than placebo. It's 79% effective.
Right.
That's what people say. The actual statistic is 79% of people that receive psychotherapy for 6 sessions reported having a better mood, better experience than the people that did not. And this was 10,000 study meta-analysis. So 10,000 studies times how many thousands of people were in each study. Anyway, so that could be that. Now, if you are into some spiritual belief systems about that, maybe that was that. We don't know. We're not taking a stance.
You're exactly right. Right, Paul. You're exactly right. I didn't question her. Is it something that if we don't go to a past life, within the session, are you not going to get the relief that you're seeking? Do I have to support and be aware that you have a past life for this to work? None of that even came up because we were just doing standard hypnosis, and she spontaneously went back into that place within herself, in that past life, as she called it. So, yeah, it's fascinating. It's a wonderful world to be with when you're working with these folks, because they're bringing into the session themselves. And I'm not here to regulate them. I'm not here to tell them, no, that's not right, or this is what you need to do, or this is what you have to do. Sure, in my expertise, I could give advice, clinical advice if needed. I'd rather have that person reach within themselves to arrive at how to best move forward. And that's what she was doing, and I applaud her for it.
That's wonderful. And then also, just speaking of the somatic feeling that she got, where she was feeling like her neck was healed, Dr. John Sarno, who is a medical doctor, MD, out of New York, he wrote many, many books about essentially what he saw as, people having having back pain, knee pain, neck pain, when the MRIs did not really show any problems. And all of these tests, and he was very large into the mind-body connection. Somatic. He actually only died a few years ago at 93. But he was showing X-rays and MRIs of people. I saw this that had terrible looking backs, terrible spines, no back pain. They reported. Other people, perfect looking spines. Back pain. So what we've learned from psychology and neurobiology and all of these different fields is that a lot of pain is somatic, and we don't fully know why some people feel that pain and hang out of that pain, and other people don't. Now there's real pain too. There's structural pain. There's issues with that, right? Oh, sure. But we're talking about when all of the science and all the tests are indicating there doesn't seem to be anything wrong on our end. Mm-hmm. It's definitely nerve pain. There's definitely nerves saying ouch, right? But those nerves may be programmed to say ouch because of something mentally, because mind body are connected. We used to treat them as different. And so I've also had people just during EMDR, which is, definitely regulated by the state, definitely a very empirically proven technique. Not that hypnosis is as well, it's just not as regulated. So where somebody was processing a past memory, and all of a sudden they felt this like pain in their stomach, and then they felt pain in their throat. And I was like, oh God, what am I doing? But I just kept processing the memory. I was like, am I hurting them? And eventually, all of a sudden they had this thought in their mind that they had to express themselves like they never had. And all of a sudden they said all of these things that they had never said to this person who abused them. And they said them in my office, and they opened up their eyes, and while we were doing
fantastic. Like an empty chair.
Kind of.
Evo, right.
I didn't even mean to do that. Like I didn't even mean to do Gestalt. And they said that during the memory processing, because we had done many sessions on this really bad memory, because they had intrusive thoughts about it, that they felt this thing in their stomach, and they felt this thing in their chest, and they felt this thing in their throat. And all of a sudden, all these words came out. And and this person, if you met them, they seem like that personality type that's super docile. They can't say no. They're a pleaser. They, if you said, how are you doing? They say, I'm doing fine. They wouldn't really probably tell you how they're really doing. But all of this angry words came out. And then
Wow.
after a few more sessions, they told me that they had felt more free than they'd ever felt. And it was really,
Yeah.
it just was strange that came out. So these things, the body
Somatic.
remembers patterns and the brain remembers patterns. So we don't, our technology is still in the beginning stages of even understanding how the brain works. I mean, we
Mhm.
might know the areas, we may know where the memory centers are, but we still don't know how this thing works. And then the brain is spread throughout your body, throughout your nervous system. That's all part of your brain. So that being said, hypnosis is a big tool for that. So I wanted to ask you about the book in particular. I have not read this one yet. So can you tell us just a little bit about what you were writing the book for and who it's for, and maybe some of that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, this book is tailored towards people who want to understand how can the power of their very own internal workings, which I'm calling their soul, which a lot of people subscribe to. What if there are keys to who they are and how to overcome things that are already within them that they have developed over time, and some of which they've been born with. It's just a part of their like DNA practically. It's like encoded within them almost, and for them to reach in there and use that as a way to move forward. That's what I wrote the book for. I want people to literally use that as a step in order to move in the direction of health and overcoming things within their life.
So this is also written for people to start discovering their own healing.
Yes.
So this is written for the consumer or the therapist.
Oh yeah, it's written for anyone.
And you can get it on Apple Books.
That's where it's available right now. Yes.
Okay, wonderful. And I know eventually you're going to probably put them elsewhere, but that's a good start for all of us people that love Apple products.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So yeah,
I
what were
just
you going
wanted
to
to
say?
follow up on the somatic part that you were talking about there, Paul. Doctors have actually a few doctors have referred people to me saying, you know what, we've run all these tests, we've done all these things. There's nothing wrong with this person, but they're still experiencing some kind of pain. We're believing it's somatic pain. And I know, and from being a trauma therapist for years, people have those stored somatic experiences locked away within their body, within their cellular memory. And when we process it, and I could use hypnosis or EMDR or a variety of things. One of which I'd like to also talk about today, a different one that's couched in Jungian work. Okay. If there's time. And so right on. So it's fascinating because there are ways to release that. It's almost like the body is saying, pay attention to me and listen to me. And once a person has heard what that part of the body is trying to say, oftentimes there's relief. Oftentimes it's released. It just needs to be acknowledged and validated.
So yeah, that is a thing that's been emerging in popular integrative medicine for sure, and also in Ayurvedic medicine and Chinese medicine, which is that symptoms are not something to be whacked over the head with a medication. They are a signal and a symbol of something wrong that we need to figure out what that is. And so what you're saying is that some of that pain, the doctors are saying, "Hey, listen to me. Acknowledge me." And one of the things we do when we have trauma, or PTSD, one of the main symptoms is avoidance. And I don't know all of why people have pain, but I know that, or somatic pain, that it doesn't seem to be structurally induced. But there is a component. I mean, it could be emotional, it could be trauma, could be sitting all day. I don't know. I don't know why people have pain. But what you're saying is, hey, pay attention to me. At the very least, pay attention to me. And if we pay attention to the pain and learn to not avoid it, it may go through the natural process that it's meant to bring us to, or maybe it's a clue to look into something. Obviously, I know people have, I read this the other day, actually. I won't name the celebrity, but some celebrity has stage 4 cancer. And I was reading the article and they're like, well, what happened? And they just said, I had a feeling of being unwell. And this person didn't have any idea they had cancer. I had a feeling of being unwell and something else. Like I felt odd, I felt off, and I went into the hospital. I just felt like something was wrong, and maybe they've been ignoring it. Maybe they, obviously they're in stage 4. They probably had some signals and signs before that, but and all of a sudden they go in there, and sure enough, they've got stage 4 cancer that they're now being treated for. Thank goodness they listened, because if they hadn't listened, they might have passed away. Well, so that being said, yeah, I want to jump into a little bit about maybe the Jungian stuff if we've got time.
Sure. Yeah. So shifting gears here a little bit. Yeah. Carl Jung's work fascinates me. His work with the shadow self, anima and animus. Anima and animus, according to Carl Jung, those are 2 parts within each individual. There's male and female, so to speak, within all of us. But getting back to the shadow specifically, so shadow self is a part of oneself that a person typically would want to disown, or they feel ashamed of. And that's, according to Jung, that's a part that person needs to acknowledge, embrace, and welcome into the person, and hear from and understand in order to feel whole. So Jung's work with dialectics and alchemy, and specifically alchemy and psychology, was just fascinating to me. And I'm continuing to read and research his work. What he did was he combined alchemy and psychology by looking at those dialectics. And for the listeners who might not be familiar with that, dialectic means opposites. So there's a north to a south, there's an east to a west, there's hot to cold. Okay. So some recent work that I've been doing that combines shadow work and the use of dialectics and this talk of alchemy dialectics involves helping people who are not responsive to EMDR. And I've had a small grouping of people who have processed specific traumas using EMDR, but then they get stuck, or they cannot actually process a specific thing within themselves. So I've thought, wow, I mean, why not, use some of this new work and see if there can be some relief. And these people, without reliving the trauma, were able to step their toe into seeing what had happened. And while doing that, feel the emotion within their body, locate where within their body they feel that sensation and that emotion. Bring about any sense of sound, smell, or color. And then also any symbolic or metaphoric representation of what that represents to them within their life. And then I ask that person to set that aside and then either float backward in time in their life when they felt calm and peace. And if there isn't any, then forward as they could imagine calm and peace. And then I ask them, look within their body then. So this isn't a closed eye sort of meditative state. Look within their body then and ask them what colors and feelings and smells and symbols are associated with that calm state and that relaxed state. And once they've got that locked in, then I say, breathe in the color of calm and those symbols of calm, and exhale through the part of their body where they felt the disturbance, the color of disturbance and the symbols of disturbance and smells of disturbance. And they do that for a period of 2 minutes. I've got some case studies where people have reported that following that small guided meditation, people see the event differently. They feel peace and calm about what had happened, and they no longer have a disturbance.
So that sounds like you've combined multiple modes of therapy in one. I'm hearing guided meditation, so a little bit of mindfulness cognitive, they call it mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or mindfulness meditation, mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is very clinically proven to work for a variety of issues. And then you're combining that with this Jungian philosophical concept of the opposites and of the symbolism, because alchemy was all about, the way he looked at alchemy was it was all about trying to express something deep in the human soul or psyche or mind that was unable to be expressed with words. And so you used elements and colors, and each color had a different reference point and different feelings. And it's really getting into that deep part of being human that's hard to explain, that language fails at. And then you're combining that also, seems like, with some sort of way to visualize the issues that the person is dealing with or the incident the person is dealing with. And you sort of kind of combine these things. It sounds like, am I missing something?
No, the only thing that I would add to that, which, because I didn't speak about the label of it, is that breathing. So when they're breathing through that part of their body, I remembered when I was doing yoga, and I still do yoga, but there was an instructor who would say, breathe through, that part of your body. And I thought, that's powerful. That really helped me in yoga. I wonder if this would help within this work. And lo and behold, it does. It really begins to help people with it.
I actually, just for our listeners, I'm going to do a little demonstration. I actually talked to a yoga instructor who also does some therapy type things. And they had this visualization. Obviously, you're not really breathing through your body. It's all about your perception. So you kind of lay down on the ground, and you simply lay down on the ground in a comfortable position, and somebody guides you and they say, okay, now imagine there's a hole in your head, that air on the top of your head, that air comes in and out of, which sounds weird. So here's what we do. You breathe in through your feet and your hands and your lower body, and you pretend when you exhale that you're exhaling visually out of the top of your head.
Wow.
So I'll do it with you. So
Sure.
Here we go.
Okay.
I want you to breathe in through your feet and through your arms and your hands, and then breathe out through the hole in your head. Now, I want you to breathe in through the hole in your head, and I want you to breathe out through your feet and your arms. Now, I want you to breathe in through your feet and your hands, out through the hole in the head, and one more time, in through the hole in your head, and out through the feet and your arms. And they kept going with that. And then there was also like a lake in your sort of stomach area and mountains, and kind of visualizing it. But that breathing, just that simple idea,
Calming.
it was calming. It helped me. It made me feel like I was directing my breathing in some way. Versus sometimes when people say, just focus on your breath, it's kind of like, okay, am I breathing right? Am I breathing enough? Do I have enough oxygen? And it can be a little bit triggering to just focus on your breath if you're an anxious person. So breathing through a hole in my head that I know is completely fictional, at the top of my head, and then breathing out through my feet, that kind of relaxed me. So how did you feel? Yeah.
It was great. It was very calming, and reminded me a little bit of yoga breathing, which is pranayama. Pranayama is a Sanskrit term for yoga breathing. And what you do is you close one nostril, breathe through that nostril, hold for 10 seconds, and then close that nostril and breathe through the other one. Hold for 10 seconds. Breathe through that one. Hold for 10 seconds. And then breathe. Yeah.
So for the listeners at home that couldn't see us doing this, we're breathing in through one nostril while we're plugging the other.
Right. Yes.
And then we're plugging at the other one and breathing out that one.
Thank you.
And I've heard different things. I've heard you can hold the breath, or some people hold after they breathed out, and I'm not sure which one is the best one, but I guess it depends on your comfort level. But I found that very helpful to calm the nervous system. I have no idea exactly why, but you need to Google this, but I looked up, some doctor sent me an article on how one of your nostrils is connected to some sort of nerve in your brain. And I think it's the left side. And so he was saying, if you're breathing through your left side nostril and then switching to your right, it does something with a certain nerve that can lead to some calming. This was on WebMD.
Wow,
So
I wonder if that's the polyvagus nerve or one of those nerves that goes through the whole body and the
it may have to do with polyvagal responses. So what we're all talking about right now, I mean, just for the people out there, is that we live in a really frantic, scary, postmodern world right now, and people are, the internet was invented in my lifetime, but the internet that we all remember in the 90s, where you dial up with a modem and things would load slowly, that's gone. And now we have this fast internet. And now we not only have fast internet, we have it in our phones and our watches if we want it. And most people do. And it's a new thing humans are trying to adapt to, but it's very stimulating. I mean, we can go watch a sunset or watch the ocean or look at a tree or look at a garden and feel like, life is slowed down and so nice, right? But when we're running around the city or whatever we're doing, and then we keep looking at the next, Twitter tweet or Reddit post or news website or whatever we're doing, or playing a game while waiting for somebody, or on social media, it's sending all of these images into our minds and bodies and sounds that we may not even have been prepared for. And so the result of that, what we're finding, not only, of course, phone addiction, we won't even get into internet addiction. That's a whole thing going in the DSM. That's by psychiatrists. We'll just talk on the therapy level here for a second of just overstimulating the nervous system to the point where people are having insomnia, they're jittery. I mean, prescription medications since the pandemic began have gone through the roof. In fact, there was actually at one point, I believe in the summer, there was a worry that we were going to run out of certain medications. So people are anxious. And so we're just talking, therapy has so many modules and modes to it, but there's some simple things you can do to work on calming your nervous system. But one of the things is you utilize the phone in your computer. Don't let your phone and your computer utilize you.
Oh, that reminds me of a Benjamin Franklin quote. Drive your business. Don't let it drive you.
I like it. Yes, exactly. And so with any sort of mindless internet use, we eventually gets you people have called it a technology loop, or gets you down the rabbit hole. The next thing you know, you've spent an hour on the internet. It's not like a TV show. I mean, that's addicting enough. Oh, but good. The next episode of my favorite TV show is coming out. Oh, I'll just watch. And now we have it on demand. You watch the next one and watch the next one. You don't have to wait till next Thursday night to watch what happens. Well, the internet is just like, oh, this reminds me of this. Well, that reminds me of this. And that reminds me of my high school friend. I'll message them. So what are we doing at that point? And of course, all the social media money comes from the advertisements that they pool based on our habits. So there's nothing, we're not taking a stance again that the internet is bad. We're not Luddites. We're literally doing this over Zoom, and we both live right now in the same state. But we're saying use it as a tool. Don't make it your world, because then it can be difficult to navigate the world if you're confused as to what's happening and you're getting many mixed messages. So these techniques are just things to help you get in and to access your deeper wisdom. And that's something I really liked and enjoyed that you said earlier about that people have the answer within themselves. And I've seen that so often, but oftentimes people get caught up in a complex or a pattern behavior or an addiction or a mindset that just starts ruling their life. And I remember this most clearly. The clearest difference I remember seeing this overnight was when I worked with a lot of guys on parole and probation. And they were caught up in this, this fantasy or that fantasy or this behavior or drug use or drug trafficking and, gang turf wars and all this. And I remember, talking to him in therapy, and, all of a sudden one of them would get arrested, and I get a email from the parole board, and they say, hey, your client's here. Do you want to come down to the jail and see him for a session or two and figure out? And especially if they were a minor, I did. If they're a minor, I get the parent involved, or the caregiver. Hey, let's go down there. Let's work on a plan to try to help them stay off, get off parole, get off probation, stay out of jail, stay out of these bad situations. And I remember going down there after, usually it took me 2 or 3 days past the email to get down there. So they've been there maybe all weekend, maybe 3 or 4 days at that time. And when I go talk to them, I felt like I was talking to a different person. They'd come out in the room. They're in the jail fatigues. They don't have any of their cool swag on. They got sweatpants and a t-shirt. And I talk to them and they say, they would just talk at me. I've been thinking, in my office, I'd have to get them to talk. And when I go to the jail, they would talk at me a million miles. I've been thinking about this. I've been journaling. I've been reading this book. I have been, we're talking to the other guys, and I need to get out of this gang. I need to stop doing this. I need to go to school. And it just all, because they sat there in contemplation.
That's a structure, maybe.
They had structure, right? And they had school in there for the temporary, of course, the adolescence. But a lot of them had a lot of time by themselves too. Because when you first get into parole and probation, if you're a juvenile, they put you on this system where when you're first there, you have to go to bed at like 6 p.m. And the better behavior you have, the later you can stay up. And if you stay up past a certain time, you can watch a movie with everybody and stuff like that, right? But otherwise, you just have to go to school, work out, eat, and go to bed. And then if you have the better and better behavior, the longer you get to stay up, the more privileges you get. You can go outside to this like area where it's, walls and everything. So they had this time inside. So there's an example right there. They had the answer within themselves. But if you had asked them that same question 2 weeks before when they were out and they had all their friends around and they came into my office, they'd tell me, wow, I'm not doing that. That's stupid, whatever. Doing the right thing. I'm not going to school. My mom's wrong. And then they had that time. So we're trying to prevent that situation by just, hey, come meet us for an hour. We'll do some exercises. We're not trying to push an agenda. We don't have an agenda. Obviously, we don't want people to kill other people. I think most therapists are anti-violence, but we're trying to just help you live your life, however that means, no matter your belief system. Belief systems are only so valuable. Exactly. Action is everything. What's that?
Exactly. Yeah. Making a choice to make a change, and sometimes change can be uncomfortable. Sometimes change can take a place where a person looks within themselves, like Paul's talking about here, like what we've been talking about. And that can be helpful. That can be useful. Think about, communication with other people. How well are you doing with other people? Are you at peace with others that are within your life? And I mean, if not, there are ways to help you with that. There are ways to, to deal with that block or that lack, and to experience freedom and to experience good flow within life.
And freedom is actually being able to make choices that you want versus feeling compelled to make choices that you're not really sure about and all of that. So that's kind of one of the definitions of freedom. I want to know a little bit about I wanted to ask you about the mindfulness coaching, but we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're just starting this wave of immunizations. And again, people can do it if they want and not if they don't. It's not our issue. But for safety concerns in your situation, I know you've been doing a lot of remote work, as have a lot of therapists, right? Because we sit in a room with somebody pretty much closer than usually 5 feet apart. We're breathing the same air, and based on the fact that this is a dangerous time for your immune system, a lot of people are choosing to go remote. So what are people's options right now if they want to do some of this hypnosis or some of this guided meditations and things like that?
Yeah. Well, they can call me. They can reach out to me, and if they're within the state of Arizona, because I only have a location here. But in general, if people who are outside the state, look for people who are either practicing hypnosis or offering, like guided meditation. And what you asked about recently, Paul, the mindfulness coaching, that can be very helpful. There are people who literally are listeners. They sit and they offer unconditional positive regard, and they're not interested in judging people. They just want to bear witness and listen to what that person has to say. We all have a story to tell, and we have things that we want to speak and speak of. And that's also another part of counseling. So the mindfulness coaching that I offer, the mindfulness part of it is one of the 4 pillars of DBT. I've studied dialectic behavioral therapy, and specifically the states of mind part of mindfulness. So it says that we have two parts to our mind. We have an emotional mind and we have a rational mind. And the rational mind deals with numbers and facts and figures. The emotional mind deals with feeling states like happiness, sadness, fatigue, or anger, or something such as that. Well, if we're stuck in one of those minds, at like the end of one of those minds, like either rational, too much rational thinking, or too much emotional, what the Linehan group says is bring in something from the opposite to offer balance. So, and that's just really a form of it's definitely a form of dialectics. I'm thinking maybe it even came from Jung originally. But anyway, so so it's if you're feeling out of control with the emotional mind, start counting backwards from threes from 33. How do you feel when you get down to 0? Start looking around your room and identifying all the colors that are within your room. Usually what that person's thinking about doesn't exist outside these 4 walls anyway. So if that person can anchor themselves within this present moment, that might lessen the disturbance. So mindfulness coaching is a part of that, the states of mind. I also bring in mindfulness from the Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh was a fantastic and prolific writer. He's late in life. I think he's in his 90s now. He suffered a stroke about 6 years ago. But he says things like, when you're washing your hands, just be with the water and the soap. That's all that exists anyway. Just be with that process. When you're walking, just pay attention to the ground beneath your feet. And Paul, you're right. In times like this, when we're plagued by all these different worries and concerns and the pandemic itself, right? When we bring ourselves into these calmer places by focusing on what it is that we can do to, just with the water and the soap or just walking, that helps us disconnect from all of the intense worry. It doesn't say, that you don't have to safeguard yourself. No, go ahead and safeguard yourself if you're walking or if you're meeting with people. But, but pay attention to just the small steps of going, just with the present moment.
And so that's what we call a practice, because some people say, well, I did that yesterday and I didn't feel any better. So we have to do practice, just like sports or writing or music, or actually when you were a baby, walking was a practice. But we have to practice this stuff. And the more you practice it, there are unending articles and studies on mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness action, mindfulness states of mind, these skills. There are unending studies on DBT skills as showing how effective they are when you practice them, because we're retraining our mind to get out of this mode it's in. So I'm curious about the mindfulness coaching. Can you do that without being someone's therapist, or is that something you have to do? Okay.
Yeah. It's a form of just regular coaching. So I could do that with someone who's outside the state of Arizona. I don't do it under my license. I just do it as a mindfulness coach. And please go ahead.
So in that situation, the person is basically just learning from you. There's no therapy going on. And so you're just teaching them the principles, practicing it with them, and then just seeing how it goes. I like that. So that's really good for our listeners, because we do have listeners all over the world. If they want to try the mindfulness coaching, do you have any number of sessions that you recommend for that?
I recommend at least one session to kind of get a person's feet wet with it. And if they feel like that's beneficial, somewhere between 2 and 3 total. If a person is interested in ongoing meditative type of sessions, where we're just doing meditation as a group or one-on-one, that could be scheduled regularly, say like once a month or once every other week or once a quarter. Studies have shown that meditation helps calm, the nervous system, helps bring down the nervous system, anxiety, and helps regulate depression and helps grow gray matter. In one study showed it helps actually
in the brain.
The brain. Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. I'm glad that you said that. Someone might wonder, gray matter where in my refrigerator?
So that being said, one thing I remember from Michael Yapko, speaking of him bringing up again, just for hypnosis or even these mindfulness coaching sessions, not that somebody would ever publish this, but have you ever allowed clients to record you doing a meditation or something like that so that they could listen to it later? Okay.
Yes, I have, and I welcome it. I just ask that the person ask me first, so that there's that transparency for both of us. But for sure, I encourage it because that's that person's session. That's that person can replay it. They can benefit from that in the future.
Yes, and one thing I liked about Michael Yapko is that at some point in his career, he just started saying to people, unless you tell me no, I'm going to record every session and upload it to a portal for you to listen to, which I thought was so cool. It's like your own personal thing. He just said, his only thing was don't broadcast it, which is fair enough. Yeah. It's your personal therapy. But I was just impressed by that he did that. And it was recently, I worked with a client who was in quite a difficult state of a change, let's say. And I did some EMDR with them. I did some meditation stuff, mindfulness meditation stuff with them. I did some guided visualizations. I did some relaxations and just talk therapy. And they said, listen, this is so helpful to me. Can I please start recording our sessions with my phone? I said, sure. So we just recorded. He said even the talk sessions were useful to him because I guess I don't know what I was doing. I was just being supportive, but I was telling him truths because he was in such a difficult state at the time that he was unable to tell himself truths about himself. And I knew him because I had known him a while before the crisis. So I was just trying to reinforce positive things about him and his life. And he said that he found it so helpful that he would listen to our sessions every day until the next week. And then eventually he got out of the crisis, and I don't even think he's recording our sessions anymore at all. But I found it very useful. So especially with mindfulness and hypnosis, those are things that you can just, use and record if the client's okay with it. If you were okay with it, as long as you ask,
Oh, yeah, for sure. I encourage it. I think that it can be definitely useful for them. It's their work. It's theirs. So, I don't. If there's time, I'd sure like to mention a little bit about the evolution of psychotherapy and some of the things that I saw there as far as how it pertains to therapy. Great. So one of their overriding messages was what I thought was interesting, and as a summation of attending most of their courses there, is a term that I've created, but it's from their work. It's called measurable hope. So we're to offer hope to people, but not just hope and we hope that someone gets there, but actually quantifiably measurable steps and a path towards getting to, help and to get a person through what they're faced with. And what I really like about that is that it speaks to like a Rogerian kind of hope, where a person's best foot is put forward, and there's this unconditional positive regard at helping that person achieve their goals.
So measurable hope. And my take on that, because I actually did attend some of the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference this year online, and I'm signed up to go in person next year in December. I'm really hoping that the world will be open enough at that point to actually go, because I signed up. But what I'm projecting onto that is measurable, meaning we know this works. Not every therapy is best for every person. Just like not every food is best for every person, not every Tempur-Pedic mattress is best for every back style. But we know this works. So it's a matter of you don't have to believe in it. You just have to know that measurably, with our measurements and with all the studies that have ever been done in psychotherapy, it works. You might have to find the right therapist. You might have to find the right method. Yeah. Just like I might have to find the right repair shop to repair my bumper on my car. I'm not taking that to the oil change guys. Okay. So
yeah, just like your car
measurable,
doesn't.
right?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just like your car doesn't get repaired unless you drive it to the repair shop to have the oil changed or to have the tires rotated. Therapy doesn't exist unless that person is willing to schedule the session to come in, and there's that meeting place between the therapist and the client to work on these goals and to get it done. But I mean, can it be? There are helpful things that can be done outside of therapy, but within the session, that's where like there's a symbiotic, nature between the person who's receiving the therapy and the therapist to help them, and it's that coming together of thought and ideas to move forward.
Absolutely. And as a therapist, I try to remove all the mystery and all this old school ego-based therapy stuff from like 1920, when therapists would like sit on their couch and smoke a pipe, and they were mostly doctors at the time. And then they were doing all the therapy psychiatrists were, and they'd be on the couch and it's free associating and they'd tell you what they thought. Or, I mean, we're getting rid of that. Okay. Any therapist who's still kind of talking down to you, you don't need to go to.
Right.
Find a therapist that tells you what we're doing, tells you what they're doing, and also sets goals with you.
Mm-hmm.
And we know what we're working on. And then micro goals. What is our goal this session? What do we want to focus on? What has been plaguing you the worst, or what is the biggest thing you want to gain? It's not rocket science to focus on what are the goals. Anyway, go ahead.
Exactly. And how do you rate this session? How well did it go? Did it meet your mark? Did it meet your needs? Yeah.
And now we're getting into the work of Scott Miller and his institute. But yes, therapists, we don't need to have a fragile ego. We do not know what's best. We can't read minds. We don't know. So we asking the client, was this helpful today? What would be better? I try to do that. I'm not saying I'm some sort of perfect saint, but you can do the worksheets. So you make sure you do every time with Scott Miller's worksheets, or the session outcome rating scale is what we're talking about. It's all free on the internet. And session rating scales and outcome rating scales. And I did that actually for a few years, where I actually gave almost all my clients those sheets to fill out, and I would learn from them. But even if you don't give them the sheet, you can ask them, what do you feel like we didn't cover? What could I do better? What was the best part of the session for you? What was the worst part of the session for you? What do you feel like you gained from this? What do you feel like you're lacking from this meeting? And that doesn't take much as the therapist, because we might have all the skills, but I don't know exactly which ones to apply. And then I don't know exactly which ones actually felt like it worked on the person. Now, I know they're all working at some level, but it's like somebody comes in, they're like, I want a paint job. And I'm like, oh, good, I'm a car painter. Sweet. I'll paint your car. And they're like, okay, sweet. Bye. I didn't say what color, what kind of glossiness, when do you want it? How much are you willing to spend? I need to get in the nitty gritty. So measurable hope for me knows we know this works. Now, if you're willing to participate, that's the barrier. And that is a barrier for some people. They're afraid. They don't want to tell you the full story. They don't want to tell you the truth. They're afraid of what they might find. And that's a symptom, or that's a difficulty they're going through. But if you let go and you can trust, and you find a trustworthy therapist that you believe in, and that is trained and is mindful, and they're not going to be some perfect deity, but is doing the work themselves, tries to at least practice what they preach on some level, you're going to have the gains. You're going to have the measurable hope. You're not even just going to need hope anymore. You're going to have actual change.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If someone shows up to me and, within my practice, and I mentioned to them something about the soul level hypnosis, if they're like, I'm really not, that's not for me, I don't continue to talk about that. I'll move on to another form of therapy. People though who do seek specifically hypnosis, or I see where there's a fit for that, I'll mention it to them, and a lot of people are receptive and gain some relief and key insights from themselves to what's there. That other work, the dialectics and the alchemy, the Carl Jungs, where they're looking at the feeling state within the body and breathing out through their body. That's recent work that I've done, and I've seen some very, very substantial results with that too. So I would, move towards something like that, as other therapists can usually do. If something's not, materializing with one type of work, move towards something else. One of the offerings at the Evolution of Psychotherapy recently was motivational interviewing, and I was blown away by the such basic, what I thought was really, really basic stuff, and I just called it basic. But I humbly submit there's a method to that form of therapy that is profound, and it's very, very useful. I've seen good results with the MI as well.
Yeah, so motivational interviewing is a whole episode on that we need to do, but maybe we will. I love motivational interviewing, and there is a method to help people when they're not ready maybe to do the action stage or even the contemplation stage of therapy, of working on something. And maybe they're still thinking about it. Maybe they're just like, I don't know. Because, you know, when it comes down to it, a lot of people, they may not know all the science, but they certainly know what the problem is. And they certainly might be able to envision what they want differently. And that's what we do. And that's the magic of, and the science and the art of what we do. So, Andrew, I want to just say it's been a pleasure having you on. What else do you want to kind of tell the audience as we kind of wrap up?
What I'd like to say is I encourage anyone who's listening, if they feel like there's something that could either be changed within their life or that they're stuck with, I want to let you know many therapists are open to literally measurable pathways towards getting you to your goals. So, you know, I want to let you know that there is hope and there is a way in order to address things. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for your listening ear. And if you feel open to checking out my book in Apple Books, as Paul mentioned it before, it is Hypnosis with a Soul, and it's written by me, Andrew Henry, MALPC. And I'm grateful for you listening. And thank you, Paul, for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician podcast. Until next time, I'm wishing you all a safe and peaceful week. I really enjoyed my conversation with Andrew Henry about hypnosis and obviously many other topics. Check out his book if you like. The link is in the show notes. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am now an EMDRIA consultant in training and am providing 15 of the 20 hours needed to become an EMDRIA certified therapist. My group has begun and we are meeting on Wednesdays online. For details, check out counselingsupervisorgr.com or healthforlifegr.com or just send me an email. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians in the Grand Rapids area at Health for Life Grand Rapids and the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com or call the office at 616-200-4433. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and their experience in their respective fields, this should not be viewed as the definitive opinion on this or any other subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you are in a crisis, please dial 911 or the suicide prevention hotline at 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. Are you a young person of color feeling down, stressed out, or overwhelmed? Text Steve, that's STEVE, to 741-741. That's Steve to 741-741, and a live, trained crisis counselor will respond. You can support your local bookstore without leaving the house by going to www.bookshop.org. That's bookshop.org. By buying online and maybe spending just a smidgen more on shipping, you will be supporting local bookstores all over the world, and your order will be fulfilled by a local bookstore instead of the Amazon behemoth that exists. If you are a counselor, please join your local counseling association. In Arizona, it's the Arizona Counselors Association right now, fighting a ridiculous House bill that would let a lot of people who are not licensed counselors claim to be them, which is not great. So check it out at Arizona Counselors Association's webpage. In Michigan, we have the Michigan Mental Health Counselors Association, and they are working to increase the availability of quality mental health services statewide, increasing education, promoting best practices, and working to keep licensed professional counselors and other professionals accessible by the public. Remember, we are in a pandemic, and if you need to see someone online, you just have to make sure they are licensed in your state. At Health for Life Grand Rapids and the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids, you can actually see the counselors online if you live in the state of Michigan. Thank you again for listening. This has been Paul Krauss with another episode of the Intentional Clinician podcast.